Good morning, everybody. I'm Phyllis. I'm the facilitator for today. I'm gonna go through the guidelines, and then I'm gonna ask everybody to go around and introduce themselves. And then I'll say a little bit why I brought this as the topic, and then I'll open the list for discussion. Eracism is the slogan of the group Erace that was formed in the summer of 1993 to show that we treat people of all colors with love and respect. Join us. So our guidelines are, if you want to get on the list to be called on to speak in order of the list, raise one finger and move it around so that the motion is detectable, like be really crazy like this. If you have a clarifying question, put up two fingers and move them around. A clarifying question is for you to ask the current speaker to say what they meant by something, either a statement or a word or a term that you don't understand. It's not to make a point, it's not to make a statement, and it is to be brief without a lot of preamble. If someone starts to ask a clarifying question and it isn't one, we'll ask them to get on the list. We ask that this be a atmosphere of safety and respect for everyone present. And so no name calling, no eye rolling, no snorts, which it helps when you're muted because people can't hear you snort. So we do ask that once you introduce yourself, that you put yourself on mute unless you're called on to speak. Because that keeps background noise and interference from being disruptive. Is there anything I have forgotten? Oh, when you do get on the list, you get 2 minutes to speak. And when, about, depending on 15 or 20 minutes from the end, depending on how many people we ultimately have in the group to do a final go round, I will call on people to do their final statements. If you have not spoken throughout the time of the meeting, you will get 2 minutes at that time to do your final wrap up. Otherwise, you'll get a minute. Any questions? Okay, so I'm gonna have everybody go around and introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Bill.
I'm Bill Ives, and I've been coming to Erace for 3 years, and I learned something new every time. And it's nice to have poetry this time. I was really moved by those poems.
Thank you. Nancy?
Nancy Moore. I've been coming to Erace since 2007.
And Nancy's going to be my timekeeper, so she can stay unmuted, so we can hear her alarm go off. Becky.
Good morning. I'm Becky Richardson. I've been attending now for, I think, maybe a year and a half. I was brought here by Cindy and Bill. I'm only in New Orleans in the winter, and otherwise I live near Boston on the sea.
Nice.
And I love this. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for such a touching and deep writing that you bring to us today. I think I need this, and just to feel it is really good. You'll see on the screen, I have 2 house guests, and that's Ulu and his wife, Cilietta, and you'll see them walk about. We might go grab our breakfast that I made. Everyone's waving to you. Cilietta, too. And so just yeah, they're visiting from California, Sonoma County, but Ulu will introduce himself. Thank you.
Yep.
And
Thank
I
you.
love the meetings. It's been coming for a little while.
Thank you. Marion?
Hi, everyone. Marion Lagarde. I live in Gentilly in the neighborhood in New Orleans. I've been participating in the Erace discussions since June of 1993 when the organization first came into existence.
Thank you. Richard? You're muted. There you go.
Yes, I think most of you know me by, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, most of you know me by another name, but I'm using my middle name today. And there's a reason for that. I'm frankly ambivalent about us going onto YouTube. I can certainly see the advantages of us spreading the word and what our mission is. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. And I agree with that. The issue I have is that, as we all know, the internet and certain platforms can be less than civil, certainly much less civil than our discussion group is. And so I am concerned about that. Hope it apparently hasn't happened yet, and I hope it doesn't happen, that we have interlopers with less than honorable intent. But for that reason, I'm calling myself by my middle name today. I've been a member like Marion since the beginning, 1993, and live in the Irish Channel. Thank you.
Thank you. Leonetta?
Good morning. My name's Lanata, and I've been a member since I was in my internship with the organization.
Thank you. Cindy?
Good morning, everyone. I've been coming to Erace for about 3 years, I think, but I knew about it much longer. I just could never free up Saturday morning. It's good to be part of it, finally. Thank you.
Thank you. Marva?
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Marva. I've been attending Erace post-Katrina, and I learned about Erace through my sibling, Glenn. I learned something every week, as Bill stated, and I look so forward to the education on Saturday morning.
Thank you, Marva. Pedro?
Yes, good morning. I'm here in Austin, Texas. Been coming to the Erace meeting this summer, and look forward as always to the discussion and the knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you. Louise?
Hi, I'm Louise, and you just picked me out about the being on YouTube, so I'll just put my first name. Anywho, I've been coming in and out of Erace for over 20 years, and now since Katrina, we moved from New Orleans to Austin, and very happy to be joining the meetings from here.
Thank you. Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle, and I've been coming to the Erace meeting since Louise introduced me to them last summer. And normally I am in Austin, but at the moment I'm coming to you guys from Fort Worth, Texas, so visiting friends.
Great.
But I'll be back in Austin next weekend. Guys,
Great.
thanks.
Thank you. And Ulu and Celietta?
Yeah, Celietta, my wife. It's great to meet all of you in California. In some ways, we're in a little white enclave. I participated in some Black Lives Matter demonstrations, but we're really here to listen and to be more engaged and learn something more about a community that is more diverse than where we live. We're more in terms of direct experience with these issues, so I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. And when you go back to California, you can join us online if you'd like.
Yeah, we have the connection there, yes.
I wanted to address what was brought up. Last Saturday, we put about 4 of the discussions, the previous 4, up on a YouTube channel that we created. We'd been intending to do that for a long time. That was the purpose of recording the meetings, to eventually get them up, to get the word out. Cheryl asked if the chat is included. You mean the thing people type in? That is not, no, that is not included. Any questions about anything to do with that? Okay. If everybody but Nancy could mute themselves right now, that would be great. I brought this topic, and I'm glad there's already been some positive response to it. Just because I felt in the immediate aftermath of the trial of Derek Chauvin and the verdict, that people needed something that was more nurturing, and maybe less dealing with all the stuff we have to deal with every day. And in some ways, this is a little bit of both. There's some good discussion between the two people, the poet and the interviewer, and then they read a couple poems. And I've really enjoyed listening to it. When I Googled Derek Chauvin verdict, this is one of the things that came up, and everything else was still like just reporting on what had happened. And then, of course, the young woman who was killed in Columbus, Ohio, which is also mentioned. So again, if everyone would mute themselves, we will get started. Who would like to be first on the list? Marion, go ahead, and I'll keep looking for fingers.
All right, I didn't want to stray off the topic, but I was absolutely fascinated, not in a positive, well, maybe shocked too, about the woman who was mentioned in the article, Assata Shakur. She's a former member of the Black Liberation Army. And that woman was something else. The FBI caught up with her, but she escaped and she's living in Cuba. As I said, I don't mean to deter from the meat of the subject, but I was just fascinated by the notorious nature of this woman. There's still a $2 million reward out for her. And I know we're supposed to be talking about the guilty verdict relating to but I was just utterly fascinated by this woman that was mentioned, Assata Shakur. She was notorious, and I remember when the Black Panthers were trying to do a good thing, and they were really crucified, and I guess because the name didn't help, but it wasn't because they were trying to do anything violent. They were really trying to help, but they got a black eye. So this woman was part of the Liberation Army, and she was in the Black Panthers also.
Thank you, Marion. Bill has a clarifying question. You have to unmute Bill.
Can't hear you, Bill.
What? I know, I just unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, what was she alleged to have done that warranted the $2 million reward?
Well, because she was affiliated with the Black Panthers, they were accused of bank robberies and killing police officers. So she was convicted of first-degree murder of a state trooper during a shootout in on a New Jersey turnpike. This was in 1973. And I know it dates me. I really don't worry about my age, but I remember that. And I thought it was just so interesting that when I did the research on her as related to this article, this came up. But she's still on the loose if she's still alive. She's in Cuba. And it was the first-degree murder charge for killing a state trooper in New Jersey.
Okay, Bill will be put on the list, Marva on the list. Next is Becky.
I wanted to
No,
say.
you're not next. Becky's next.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were gonna call.
Oh, sorry. Cheryl, you have a clarifying question for Marion? Okay, hold on, Becky. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see you.
Marion, can you tell me where in the article her name is mentioned? I just skimmed through and I couldn't find it.
I guess it depends on what article you were looking at. I went to Wikipedia
No, in our article, she's mentioned in one of the
Oh,
poems.
yeah, she's mentioned it in one of the poems, yes. Assata Shakur, yes.
It just says Assata, it doesn't say Shakur.
Well, well, when I did
it's-
the research, it gave her name.
Yeah,
And
it's
that's
not
not
in-
her real name. Her name is Joanne something.
So there's Martin is saying, remember Martin, remember Assata? It's that paragraph.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, where were we? Becky.
Thank you. Well, I think the poems point out that, yes, we're glad that the officer got the guilty verdict, but it's not enough. That's what, there has to be a reform that somehow changes the way the police think about their job, I would say. Because it seems there's so many people being killed, even people killed during this trial. And I guess this one person that was killed after the trial. It doesn't change their minds. It doesn't make them think differently about their job. So I don't know how we make that possible. And then I was just going to say that the poems are so beautiful of both. Well, I thought Amanda Gorman's poem was beautiful during the inauguration, but I don't know if we could all listen to some of the poems in one of our sessions and then maybe talk about them. I don't know, maybe that's too difficult a thing, but I certainly, if I can't listen to them on YouTube, I'm going to buy the book on audio and listen to him read them. They're really, really wonderful. But Amanda's poems are wonderful too. That was my comment.
And you know that the link I sent you could either listen to the audio from the NPR or you could read it. So I don't know if you
Yeah,
realize
I
that.
listened on listen to NPR. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Bill.
I have a bunch of things to say about the poem, but I just wanted to respond to something that Marion mentioned about The Fugitive. We watched the movie U.S. versus Billie Holiday, which is a very powerful movie. And it was how J. Edgar Hoover was out to get her because of the song Strange Fruit. And they persecuted her throughout her life. And she died handcuffed to her hospital bed by the FBI agents. It was just atrocious. And the other thing, I was around in '73, and I remember all those things. There was one of my neighbors in Somerville, Mass, was accused of shooting a cop in a bank robbery. I don't know whether it was true or not. I didn't know the person, but I recognized his address as just down the street from me. We've been watching the Aretha Franklin series. There's a great series on Hulu of geniuses. First, we watched Einstein, then we watched Picasso, and the next genius is Aretha, who is clearly a genius in her field, that on par with the first two. But at one point during her career, she got involved with the Soledad brothers and supporting Angela Davis, and changed her hairstyle to an afro and really got involved in Black Power movement. And Jerry Wexler, who was her producer, was just saying, "Oh no, you're going to alienate your fan base." And she said, "I don't care." And she had made a lot of money then, and she donated a lot to the defense of the Soledad brothers and California prison. So it was interesting.
Okay, do you want to get back on the list to talk about the poems?
Well, I want to listen to some other people first, and I will get back on the list first.
Okay, thank you. Marva, you're next.
On CBS this morning, they were talking about the movie Holiday, Strange Fruit. And I learned something new. The Rosenbergs, I remember when I was a child, they were electrocuted, and felt so sad. I didn't understand the politics about it because I was quite young. And the man who
See,
wrote
Michelle.
Strange Fruit adopted the Rosenberg's two children that was left parentless. And she got, as Bill said, she got hassled and mistreated because she wanted to sing that song, and it had meaning for her. And her friends and musical advisors tried to stop her from singing this song Strange Fruit because they were afraid, but she was relentless, and she got herself in trouble by singing the movie. I only saw the movie trailers, but I plan on watching it on Hulu tonight. And they dragged her off the stage, the government people. That's all.
Thank you, Marva. Michelle is next, and then Bill. And is there anybody else who'd like to get on the list? Okay. Go ahead, Michelle.
I just wanted to say that since this conversation got started about the Assata and the Black Panthers, I put it in the chat, but coincidentally, my colleague at Co-op, my co-host with Civil Rights and Wrongs, sent me a link to an NPR story, a podcast about the Black Panthers, and interviewed a woman who's done lots of historic research on them. And I only got about a quarter of the way through it, but I will say that there was a lot of information in it so far that I've listened to that I did not know about the Black Panthers. And to a certain degree, though, since I've seen some other documentaries and read other things, I definitely have come to a different opinion about the Black Panthers than originally was when I was younger, and just heard the mainstream media's interpretations of who they were. So I encourage those of you who are interested to listen to it. I'm going to plan to finish listening to it, but I thought it was insightful and kind of coincidental given the conversation where it went in the beginning. And I did really enjoy the poetry in the article that, in this article as well, Phyllis, just for a comment on that. It's it's like Amanda Gorman's poem at the inauguration. It's very thought-provoking for sure. So anyway.
Thank you. Bill is next, and then the list is open. And then I'll put Richard on the list.
Marva has her hand.
Oh, was it? I'll put you on the list. I see you. Give me a minute.
I'll get to the poems in a minute, but in the U.S. versus Billie Holiday, it was really brought home to her. She was doing a tour of the South, and her bus stopped in a place in the South, and they went for a walk, and there was a Black man hanging from a tree, and his family was underneath the tree crying. And that image, she kept remembering that, and that was her determination to sing that song. I remember that, and this is a great example of white privilege, the Oath Keepers and all those white militia were far more disruptive than the Black Panthers were. The Black Panthers armed themselves, but they had programs to feed kids and schools, and they started out with very good intentions. And then the police started going after them, and in a way that they don't go after the Oath Keepers and all those white militias. But anyway, I'll get back on the list in a minute to talk about the poems. Sorry.
Okay. Richard, you're next. Please unmute.
Okay. I really like the second. There were two poems that were discussed in this article, and the one that Alexander put together for the Kwame Alexander put together for the Civil Rights Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama, which was a compilation of apparently hundreds of poem fragments that people from around the country sent in. I do agree it was a very powerful and inspiring poem. This first poem I had a lot more problems with, which I guess I can get to at another discussion. But the one issue that the one part of the poem, the second poem that I had issue is the poem that says, "This is for the summer." This is the part of the poem that says, "This is for the summer streets that once held our children's laughs, now turn to gunshots and mourning wails for the black lives fired up who can't take no more. This is for the faithful and fearless." Well, I guess many people will interpret that section as primarily the issue of police violence in African-American communities. But I just like to, I mean, my interpretation, and I think it could easily be interpreted that so much of the violence in African-American communities and minority communities is from within the community itself. And there's no question that there's an incredibly destructive amount of violence in these communities. I was just reading in yesterday's paper, a 14-year-old boy shot in Central City and killed. 15-year-old boy shot and killed in St. Roch. The amount of violence against children within the African-American neighborhoods and minorities communities is continuing in New Orleans as it has since I moved here 41 years ago. It's way, way out of hand. And so when we talk about violence within the Black neighborhoods, it's mostly, not exclusively, from within those neighborhoods. It doesn't justify by any means police brutality or police violence. But in terms of proportionality,
Becky,
you can't get away from the amount of violence that's going on day to day in our city.
okay, thank you, Richard. I've got Marva, Bill, Nancy, and Becky. Marva, you're up.
I remember the Black Panthers. I was approximately 8 years old, and they were located in the Lafitte Housing Project and the Desire Projects. They started a feeding program for the children. It was called a breakfast program. And they had preschool education, babysitting for the working parents. Many times they were left alone in the housing project to run around and get into trouble. They had the after school program where you can go and read books and take care of your homework. But they dismantled that and labeled them as troublemakers and organization against
Miss you, Cheryl.
Against the federal government and policing. I can remember the good that they did, and even though I was young, approximately 8 years old, I knew one of the Black Panthers. I babysit for them at a young age of 8 because they lived next door. I don't think I could have babysit far away from my parents. I thought I would shed a little light on that.
Thank you very much, Marva. I appreciate that. Bill, you're next.
Okay, I'll finally get to the poem. I like both poems, but I was really moved by the first poem. The suffocating nature. We can't breathe the air. We can't break the chains. We can't take a knee. We can't drive a car. We can't walk the street. We can't ride a bike. And it just reminds me of all those people who were killed by the police doing those very things. And then the last, and I'll get back to more of that, but I wanted to say the last sentence, we can't live, but we will not die, just reminds me of the Sam Cooke song, Change is Gonna Come. I'm tired of living, but I don't want to die because I don't know what's up there in the sky. And it just had the same kind of feeling of perseverance. But all those, you can't. And now Florida states are not only saying you can't vote, but you can't protest either. And in Florida now it's okay to drive a car into a protest and you won't suffer any consequences. So my response is, well, tell me when the next Klan rally's going and I'll get my car and go to it. I'm not serious about that, but that's how it makes me feel. So the Republicans are now completely open. They're worse than it was during Trump. They're defiant. The Texas legislature doesn't care whether corporations are going to punish them. In fact, they're going to punish corporations. The Georgia Senate revoked some of Delta Airlines tax breaks because they spoke out against the laws. And the Texas Republicans are vowing how they're going to take revenge on any corporation that speaks out against their voter suppression. I think
I hear the time up. Do you want to be back on the list?
No, I don't want to monopolize. I want to hear some other
Okay.
voices.
I've got Nancy, Becky, and then Cheryl. Anybody else? Put your finger up if you're interested. Nancy?
I just want to say I listen to WWL every day. And people call in all the time. And anytime that there is a police shooting or a mass shooting that affects the African American community, the first thing these callers call in and say, well, what about the violence within the Black community? Which certainly is an issue. But we are talking about two different things. One has nothing to do with the other. And unless you're in a position to be affected by it, I really don't think you should be making a comment about it. Okay, the police violence where you're stopped because you're driving the wrong car, or you're stopped because you look suspicious, or you're stopped because you have an air freshener hanging from your rearview mirror, which results in your death, which certainly would not happen if your skin tone were different, has nothing to do with the violence that occurs in Black communities because of poverty and lack of education and lack of opportunity, which is inflicted by the white establishment. It is two different things, and I am offended.
Thank you. Leonetta, is that one finger or two? Just one. Okay, I'll put you on the list. And Bill, I'll put you back on the list. And next is Becky.
And I certainly don't want to offend either Nancy or Marva. Sorry, I'm terrible at names. I have to write it down. But I'd like to say that I'm listening to Obama's wife. Sorry, I can't do names and also do
Michelle.
Michelle, thank you. I'm listening to the end of Michelle, where she really describes how the communities became ghettos because they were so labeled and publicized in the papers and everywhere they could be publicized. And the support systems that were politically available, probably when Marva was 8 years old, and also my companion that I live with in the hat. It was easier then because there were more support systems for the children and for the parents, and all of those have been withdrawn. So you have a situation where there are people who are extremely poor, they can't actually find jobs to take, and they're living under terrible conditions of buildings and roads that are falling apart. And the children, as Michelle actually went to this particular community near Chicago or in Chicago, and recognizing that the children's most dangerous time for them to go outside was when the sun was hot, because that's when the police were active terrorizing them, and the impoverished people were active because it was warm outside. And she really regretted, Michelle did, that she couldn't do more than she did develop a specific project and that helped those children. So I'll stop now.
Do you want to get back on the list, Becky?
Well, maybe I'll raise my hand.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl, you're next. Marv, I see you.
First, I want to thank Nancy because that was very important that we heard that. So thank you, Nancy. So besides feeling very numb the last week, besides having so many friends that are dealing with deep forms of what I would call depression and being empathetic, that's been very hard. I do, I'm going to pledge to everybody, I'm going to start going to my police meetings. I'm going to figure out those need to be on Zoom right now because they're not happening, because I think that I'm going to read the last part going back to the poem over and over again, that let us come in unity, let us lift our voices to rise. So it's definitely an antidote for me to work with the numbness that I'm feeling. I believe Marianne is the one that mentioned the Black Liberation Party. And I had several visits from the FBI because there was a darling woman that came to town here with her child and was living here. And her husband may be one of the people that is just getting, or is in prison or has been let out from this, but she was one of the members and was active in all that. And although I always could tell there was something going on that was deeper in her, because there were certain things that I don't have time to discuss right now, she was a great mother and a gentle person. And I certainly did my part to just, and that's why I don't like being on YouTube, to just ensure that hopefully she had fair trial. And I'm just stating, knowing one of the people that was in that group personally and spending several hours with her, who was during those crimes that were committed for the armored truck robbery, it's interesting because I feel like I have a good judgment of people.
Okay.
Thank you, Cheryl. Next, I have Leonetta.
Yes, I want to piggyback on what Nancy said. When Richard was talking about the crime here in New Orleans, I am not justifying nothing that's going on. I'm just offering an explanation. We have so much trauma here. We have generational trauma. We have the trauma of Katrina, and we also have the people do not know how to deal with it. And with the trauma comes with the anger, and they have no way to deal with it but that violence. And there's just too many guns in New Orleans. So that's one thing. I want to talk about the article when they did the list of the things that Black folks do, that they lose their life. Nancy mentioned some of the things, but just walking down the street, being in your own house, the man that was killed in Dallas, he was in his own house watching television and he was killed. And it just got to stop. It's just too much. It's just too much killing. And I thank Phyllis, thank you for picking this article, because I just needed to say that to somebody today about, and about the verdict. I really didn't think it was going to go that way. I really didn't. I was praying and I was hoping, and my prayers was answered, but I did not think he was going to be convicted. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonetta. Bill, you're next.
First to what Leonetta said, this is just the first step. I mean, the judge could give him a minimal sentence, or there could be appeals. So I was relieved with the verdict, but it's to be determined. I do want to also, and I'm only talking about how I feel, and I'm not trying to cast aspersions on anyone, but I felt the same way as Nancy did when Richard made those comments. And all the can'ts, one of the can'ts is not in here, is you couldn't buy a house in many areas. I mean, and we discussed this on another program, the ghettos were created by the white government. And after World War II, when there was all those developments like Levittown and everything, there were redlining, but the redlining was very explicit. The government FHA loans said in Levittown it was illegal to sell to a black family, and anyone who signed a deed and bought a house pledged that they would never sell or rent to an African American family. So amongst the list of can'ts, that's why we have the ghettos, and as Nancy said, that's why there is so much crime, because there's no opportunity. And I'm not condoning the crime, but I understand the reason. And there's absolutely no comparison between that crime and the police lynching that continues to go on to this day. And so it's a false equivalency to say that.
Thank you, Bill. I've got Marva and then Richard, and the list is open. Marva, you're next.
I remember when I was 5 years old and I had the pneumonia. And my parents learned about food stamps, which Blacks didn't know about. My daddy's boss was a white man, and he helped out all he could with giving my dad little projects at his house to earn extra money. We were a 9-sibling family. And Mr. Glenn sent my dad to the office of food stamps, and my mama took me with her. And she didn't know where to spend the food stamps once we got them. And she called Mr. Glenn, and he found a grocery that was in Mid-City, but it was in an all-white neighborhood. And when we entered the grocery, they said, "What do you want?" And she said, we were directed here by my husband's boss, and he said, "What you got that? What you got there, gal?" And he said, when my mom presented the coupons, she didn't know how to use them, and he said, "Where did you get these things from? They're not for colored people." And and 10 years passed before Black people or people of color knowed anything about the food stamp project or program. I couldn't believe that. Thank you.
Thank you, Marva. Richard, you're next. The list is open after Richard.
Okay, yes, several things I'd like to respond to here. Again, absolutely there is, well, let's say, in one sense, yes, there is no moral equivalency between police shootings from whatever skin color the police happen to be against other individuals, whatever skin color they happen to be. But, you know, this article does include the line, and I'll repeat it again. This is for the summer streets that once held our children's laughs, now turn to gunshots and morning wails. For the Black lives fired up who can't take no more. This is for the faithful and the fearless. Indisputably, without question, in cities across the country, from Chicago to New Orleans to New York, the cities where you have young Black children killed, young African-American children killed, young Hispanic-American children killed, young children of any skin color killed, it's unfortunately coming from within these minority communities. It does, you know, the explanations are legitimate about the historical background of slavery.
Marion, I got you.
We've had these discussions many, many times, but
Pedro.
it doesn't justify it. It doesn't, the grief is equal, whether it's
Pedro, I
someone
see
from
you.
within the community causing the gunshot or the police. The grief for the parents is equal. So in that sense, there is moral equivalence.
Thank you, Richard. I've got Marion and then Pedro.
There's this old saying, until you have walked in my shoes, blah, blah, blah. If you are in a community where I'll say 98% of the people look like you, and you're going through a very frustrating period in your life, you're denied economic justice, you're denied equal justice under the law, you're constantly told you're worthless, you're inferior,
Becky,
you don't deserve to live. That's going to take a toll on you. And I'm going to say that I think it is remarkable that people who look like me have been able to survive a system on a continent, in a place from which they were unwilling to come to in the first place. I was talking to my granddaughter last week about a history that wasn't taught in the schools when I was growing up. And because she's 50 years younger than I am, we have very challenging and interesting conversations. And I said, what so many people don't understand in this country and perhaps around the world, but I'm only aware of what goes on in this country as far as it relates to me, that you had a people who were kidnapped. And if I'm not mistaken, today's law said kidnapping is illegal. So you took people who were unwilling to cross an ocean and you brought them in chains here. And then you have this double standard about, okay, well, we're gonna mistreat you like you're a pile of garbage, but then you're supposed to function in some way. So I think it's quite remarkable, as I said earlier, that people that look like me have been able to rise above that, make achievements, but then
Richard,
turn around and you get kicked in the teeth because some people that live in certain communities that haven't been able to rise above the injustice and the inequality take it out on each other. And we've had this discussion before in our Erace organization, since I've been in the organization for 20 plus years. And it was brought out that when you get angry, when you get frustrated, you reach a boiling point, whoever gets in your face, whoever pushes that hot button, you're gonna take it out on them. It's no excuse, but considering that we're all flesh and blood, we're human, we're not Jesus, we're gonna take it out on whoever's closest to us. So we have to keep in mind that none of us are perfect. We all go through trials and tribulations. And you reach a certain point where you just can't take it anymore. I'm not justifying murder. No one has a right except the one who created us to take our life away from us. But let's all remember that we're all human beings, and it's just so much a human being can take.
Michelle.
So they can't take it anymore.
Thank you. Thank you, Marion. I've got Pedro, Louise, Becky, Marva, Richard, and Michelle. That might get us close to wrap up. So we'll see how it goes. So Pedro, you are next.
Thank you, Marion, for that very eloquent experiential presentation there. I think that's really important. My thoughts were, yeah, society, we often talk about this personal responsibility, and that's what we're taught to focus on when we talk about Black on Black violence. But there's social irresponsibility of our country that has created in our all Black communities being asphyxiated by poverty and lack of economic opportunity. And survival skills are created that may not be as healthy as we desire, but to judge them without having that experience is a problem. Dr. King wrote in his Beyond Vietnam speech that Vietnam is a symptom of a far deeper malady within the American spirit. And he wasn't just talking about U.S. foreign policy. He was talking about, I believe, racism in America. And so in this poem, when it says we can't breathe the air, we can't break the chains, we can't run away, that if I'm an African American or a person of color, I face things every day that we cannot run away from. It's the reality of that deeper malady. And I just felt like this term weatherization that Dr. Arlene Geronimos, I've brought it up in the past, through science research has documented that the toll that certain people take day in and day out as they walk down the streets, that being of white privilege, I would never experience, is a toll that results in shorter days and more challenges every day. So that's all I had. I found it to be very, very powerful.
Thank you, Pedro. Louise, you're next.
Well, thank you, Pedro. You just totally took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say that I'm not quite sure where Richard was coming from as far as saying that being killed by police, is the same as, there's a problem with Black on Black crime and deaths. But to me, it's the same thing, because it all stems, as Pedro just said, from the no chances, no support, bad quality education. All of this leads up to a place where we cannot understand, you cannot understand, I cannot understand fully because of our white skin. And they have had to deal with all of this systemic racism, which includes police brutality. So yes, it's that, I feel that you were shifting the blame to the Black communities. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not, it's way deeper, and it's been going on since, as someone said, they were brought over from Africa in chains. I mean, that's it.
Thank you, Louise. Becky is next.
Yeah, I just want to thank, well, really everybody but Marion and Pedro for what they said. And I do think it's absolutely wonderful that in spite of the hardships that are just all the time are part of your life, it's amazing the heroes and heroines that you do have that have somehow made it through all this. I mean, the Obamas, really, both of them, each of them offered so much, but they're not the only ones. But it is wonderful. Those people we can all look up to as making a significant change. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Marva, you're next.
So many songs are and poems are written from the heart and self-experience. And the first poem was a tearjerker for me. I had to stop for 10 minutes and get composure after seeing George Floyd video over and over. Um, and I think um, the poem started many years ago, and we are using them now to stand up and speak. And I'm glad the younger people are beginning to use poetry to express our plight. Thank you.
Thank you, Marva. So we've got Richard and then Michelle, and we have lots more time. So if anybody else wants to jump on the list, put your fingers up. Marva, get back on, and Bill. Okay, go ahead, Richard.
Oh, thank you.
Cindy.
You know, most of you here who live in New Orleans, you know, we've met person to person, and I think we know each other fairly well through the years, particularly Nancy and Mary and Phyllis now has been on the scene for quite a while, and Marva. And you know, we've had these discussions for as Nancy and others have said, you know, quite a few times. And you know, I've learned so much from folks like Nancy and Glenn and others about you know, what it feels like to be living in a in many ways oppressed community. But speaking directly to what Nancy, you know, said earlier, as a human being, I absolutely, and as a citizen of New Orleans, I absolutely positively have a right and a willingness to speak about what's happening in this city, regardless of what neighborhood it is. And it gets to what Nancy said, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nancy, this was several meetings ago, and it's about the contradictory things that we hold in ourselves, that we look to each other as human beings, and we have every right to comment about what other human beings are doing. And at the same time, we have to acknowledge that society is placing skin color at a much higher judgmental level than it needs to be. It's a social construct, and it infuses every aspect of conversation when it comes to cultural and social issues, particularly along the lines of racism, obviously. This group started in 1993 when, as Marion and others recall, the Pizza Kitchen killings were the results of African-American gunmen killing primarily white kitchen employees in the pizza kitchen in New Orleans. It obviously was a very tense time, and it resulted in Rhoda Faust, and I believe her last name was Williams.
Brenda Thompson.
Yes, Rhoda Faust, to create this group. So we can't get away from, you know, the underlying pervasiveness of perceptions, and that we're just beginning to scratch the surface about being honest with each other about the kinds of folks that call WWL and express their frustration. They are seeing what's going on around them. Are some of them, quote, racist? Possibly, but the word racist, I think, has been so it's not the word that it was when I think this group started in 1993. And Marion and I have talked about discrimination, prejudice, and other bias, other ways to explain what's going on in our in the relations that that different skin tone people have with each other. So, but I just want to repeat to Nancy that I really feel bad that she feels offended by that, but it gets back to her analogy earlier on that we as human beings can talk about other human beings, and there is no, as other people have said, there is no way to justify any violence at all. And that's certainly unprovoked. And it's metaphorical to say that it's provoked by racism, by historical oppression. Most African Americans, the last thing they would think about would be to pick up a gun and shoot anybody. Most would not do that. So it's not a matter of oppression being the cause. It's the explanation, but by no means the justification for any violence by any policeman, by anybody at all. And we can get back to that too. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Michelle, you're next.
Well, I just, all this talk of the violence within all the communities. I mean, one, I think psychologically motivation can be also kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? When you talk about domestic violence, that's a problem within the white community, definitely. And that's also the same, we're killing each other, or people that supposedly love each other or the same are killing each other. So if we need to come to a psychological understanding, we can just look to that as white people I'm talking about for explanation there, or not explanation, but just parallels. And secondly, as a white person, I have to point out to all the other white people here that, if we want to address this issue, which is a large part has to do with gun violence, the people in charge in our governments are majority white, and we need to be the ones pressuring them to do something about it, because that's one of the issues that I think this country has not been able to address. And as long as all the Republicans obviously have control of that, nothing's going to change. But I just will point out that as white people, we are the ones that are going to be pressuring the other white people that are in control of this issue to be the ones to bring about the change. And that's just one small part of it, but that's a big part of it, is the gun violence. And white people are in control of that. I mean, point blank, I think that's just the God's honest truth there. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle. Marva?
I want to read a poem that was in the 30s, 1930s. First They Came for the Communists by Martin Niemöller. First they came for the communists, and I did not speak because I wasn't a communist. They came for the Jews, and I did not speak up because I wasn't a Jew. They came for the Catholics, and I did not speak up because I was a Protestant. They came for me, and by that time, there was no one left to speak up for me. That rings true. You may change the groups and the races of people. In that time, the 1930s, people was using their words to fight oppression. And I think we have not gotten a message as of today. This, I feel that it's from the heart, and also the first poem that brought me to tears. Thank you.
Thank you, Marva. I've got Bill and then Cindy, and then we will do the wrap up.
Okay, I want to say something, and I want to be clear. I'm not talking about what anyone in the group has said so far when I say this. But the false equivalencies are just so rampant. And the Republicans are now insisting, Nancy Pelosi wants to do an investigation of the Capitol riots. And the Republicans are insisting that they include an investigation of Black Lives Matter. And every time people talk about the Black Lives, but the riots by the police, they say, what about Black Lives Matter protests that destroyed our country? Anyway, the Kant poem really struck me a lot. And it's not an exhaustive list of Kants. One of the Kants that Kamala Harris talked about when she became Attorney General, you could not get the police to investigate a crime against a Black person. You could not get the police to follow up on a missing person if the person was Black. And Harris tried to change all that to get better law enforcement for crimes against Blacks. And one of the examples, there was a missing person, a Black woman that she knew, and the police were doing nothing about it. So she organized a statewide investigation, and they finally found the woman who unfortunately was dead in the gutter. But you know, the police in Black communities are seen as people of oppression and not as people to provide support against crimes. I'm not saying that about all police. I'm just talking about perceptions. And based on the actions by some. So, anyway.
Thank you, Bill. Cindy? Are you unmute, please?
Sorry about that. Usually I have more to say, but I've mostly been listening today. I've lived almost all my life in the South. And you live with what you're used to. Now, both my parents were avid integrationists and anti-racist, but we were in a small Southern town. My dad was a minister, but you're still surrounded by it. I don't remember very many incidents, but the feeling of difference was very strong. Then I moved north to go to college. Same thing. It overtly seemed to be less incidents of racial animosity, but the undercurrent was very much there. How we begin to change or continue to change this, it seems so resistant. And I really think the biggest key is contact. And if much of white suburbia has no contact with someone with brown skin, how will they accept the reality that we're all people, we're all the same, different wishes, different hopes, but basically the same idea. It's very discouraging to me to see riding through a suburb how totally white it is. And if you're lucky, you might see one or two African-American families or Asian families for that matter. Residential segregation has led to elaboration of a system that's been bad from the beginning. It's very discouraging to me. I taught in the best public school in New Orleans, wonderfully mixed. And over the years, the private schools pulled out the highest achieving African-American kids to go to these little separate worlds where they were one of, maybe 5 African-American kids in the school. And I'm sure they got a good education, but I question their motives in removing them and of the families from saying, sure, let's go there. They were given scholarships and that's good for the kids, but I question the intentions. It's a very discouraging time for me to look at how far we have not come in my lifetime. It makes me sad. Enough.
Thank you, Cindy. So now we'll go into the wrap up, and I'm going to have the 2 or 3 people who haven't spoken yet to take their 2 minutes first. So first we'll do Amal for the wrap up. And also during the wrap up, if I call on you, you can say pass if you don't want to say anything.
I go now?
Yes, go.
I was just waiting on my cue, that's all. Oh, so a lot was said. Listen to the poem. I was actually impressed by it. Historically, if you look back, through music, through poetry, through art, Black people have always expressed our struggle. if you look back historically. And strange fruit was only one aspect of that. So if you take the time to look back historically, I mean, what you think the Harlem Renaissance was all about? That was an expression of our struggle. So this has always been in our art, whether that be through music and poetry, movies, and so on and so forth. The issue here, the issue that I notice is that one of the things, whenever somebody is expressing their struggle or their pain or their frustration with something, and somebody comes with the rebuttal, well, what about? That person is not listening to you, because the what abouts should not matter. I'm telling you something that is my pain, my struggle, and my frustration, and your response to that, well, is going to be, well, what about? That's a person that's not listening to you. So historically, whenever Black people have expressed our pains and our struggles, white people haven't been listening to us, because the response has always been, well, what about? And then they'll throw in things like, well, what about Black on Black crime? Well, what about Black people not doing this? Well, what about Black people not taking advantage of that? You're not hearing me, and you don't care to hear me, and that's okay, because the whenever Black people get so frustrated that we take to the streets, and it looks like we're burning our own neighborhoods, that's the end result. Because you haven't heard me when I express my struggle and my pain to you. So when the minute things start to burn down, then you want to jump up and say, well, what's going on? Well, what happened? This is the end result of you not hearing me when I express my pain and my struggle. So that's what's been going on. And that's what you're seeing in the United States right now. We're 50 years after, 50 plus years rather, after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., when everybody took to the streets and you saw all of those cities like Detroit and Chicago and so on and so forth were burning down. We're 50 years after that. And here we are now, taken to the streets again 50 years later for the same thing. So that means that for 50 years, and it's been longer, but I'm only using that time frame to make a point. So that means that within the 50 years since the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, nobody has heard nobody, because we thought that everything was okay. And that has historically been the problem. We have been thinking that everything is getting better and everything's going to be all right. And if you just sit back and wait just a little bit longer, we're going to fix this problem. Ain't no problems been fixed. Otherwise, we wouldn't have people in the streets taken to the streets right now. And so that's what's been going on. One more point. People kill within the proximity of where they are. People hurt people within the proximity of where they are. When we talk about crime, most crimes are intraracial, not interracial. So when they say Black on Black crime, it's almost become like this calling point, as if the white people don't kill white people. Most crimes are intraracial, not interracial. But historically, when they've been interracial, white people have historically killed Black people because we're Black. Now, when Black people kill white people, we don't have a history of killing white people because they're white. We just don't have that history in this country, especially having it backed up by a system that allow for it.
Thanks,
I know I
Amal.
I had more to say, but I'll digress.
You should have got on the list. You never got on the list.
I should have, but I just wanted to mention it.
Thank you. Ulu and Salita, will you be both going separately if you want to go at all?
Unmute.
I think we'll be going separately.
Okay, that's great.
I appreciate being able to sit into such a conversation. As I said, our neighborhood is, we don't have, let me back up. The community I live in is predominantly white. And over the last few years, we've had several Black families move into our city, which I'm really glad to see. It's a function of economic discrimination as well. And I'm really it's part of the conversation today. I'm aware of the racial injustice and violence as symptomatic of something that is deep in our historic soul, and it's encouraging to see people talking about the depth of that pain and its repercussions. So, thank you for allowing me to be with you today.
Thank you. I hope you'll join us again, no matter where you are.
I have the link now.
And Salita's coming on. Hi.
Hi there. I'm sorry, although I was introduced, we're house guests and I've been doing laundry. But I have heard a bit of what you're talking about, and I do understand. I mean, it's the tiniest amount what the problems are. I realize how much, been realizing more and more how much I absolutely don't know.
Yeah.
And I so appreciate, it seems like there's a tiny bit more room, maybe, hopefully, for people who aren't the white dominant group in society to be able to be heard. And I just hope that increases exponentially. As awful as all this violence is, I'm hoping that that can bring things maybe to more awareness for more people, because it's just so horrendous. There's no words for it. So just hoping for more awareness for all of us, and consciousness, including myself. Thank you all.
Thank you. So now we'll go into the people who did speak, and you'll each have 1 minute for a quick wrap up. We'll start with Marion. You have to unmute yourself, Marion.
I didn't hit the button hard enough. Okay, at the top of my notes in my race discussion notebook, I wrote in red with an asterisk and exclamation points, very lively discussion. So being in the organization for so many years, we've had a few, but today was especially lively, and I appreciate that. So with that being said, I appreciate the opportunity. And I especially appreciate the opportunity that we have people coming from other areas in the United States other than just Louisiana. So you can get an idea of hearing from someone else, and you can hear somebody else's perspective who doesn't look like you. So I appreciate this opportunity. And I am looking forward to our next Erace discussion.
Thank you, Marion. Becky?
Yes, I just want to second what Michelle said. It's time for us who are white to really pick an issue which will move us forward and out of this really bad situation. And I think gun control certainly is one of the things, and perhaps childcare is another. So have a good week, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for including me in the discussion.
Happy to have you here. Pedro.
Yeah, so just quickly, I would just like to add that I think we tend to overly demonize Republicans and misplace the blame too much on them. Under Democratic administrations as well, and even under President Obama, wealth inequality increased, and I think that's generated so many hardships for so many people that allowed Trump to win the presidency. So that's number one. The number two thing is on violence, and I think it's clear, and I think we all know that poverty and racism, that by definition they promote a devaluation of and make people of color lesser human beings, and I think that is the greatest purveyor of violence, is poverty and racism, and that spins out and is connected to this wealth inequality. But I think until we really understand that there's no greater form of violence, I believe, than poverty. Then we focus too much on other people's actions and such. So while there is a difference between Republicans and Democrats, I think under both administrations, they have profoundly failed the problems that we've all been talking about tonight. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Pedro. Louise?
So Marva, I know that poem too, and it's a wonderful poem. And I totally, agree with that content because it kind of brings us back to last week's discussion on how we should all be involved in fighting the fight, all different groups fighting the fight together for sure. And again, to echo Michelle's point of white people needing to get it together, and get a move on and start to unlock the grip around people of color's neck. To put another analogy, I do love analogies. We need to start breaking those fingers off, and doing something ourselves to help the fight. Something a little bit more than just saying, "Oh man, this is a horrible situation." We do need to do something for sure. Great discussion. Thank you. Have a great week.
Thanks, Louise. Marva?
I want to thank you for bringing this topic and article. Great job, Phyllis, and great discussion. I want to apologize to you all. I had the COVID and I don't express myself clearly anymore. I guess I should be grateful. That's the only side effect I had from having the COVID. My communication and verbalization is jumbled and not free flowing. So I do apologize for that.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Marva. But I just want to say, when you were talking about growing up near the Panthers, you seemed completely, it made sense. It was not confused. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Cheryl, who makes her house guests do laundry, I guess.
Oh, no, they're traveling. It's their traveling. But
okay.
if you want to do some of my laundry, it would be fine as well. And thank you, everybody, for letting them be here. And I'm going to, before I go on my little rant, wish you all a very good week. And thank you for such a stimulating conversation. And for the people speaking out when it may have been painful or having to be here and listen to painfulness, things that were painful expressed. It's my whiteness. I wish I could fix things. I've got this written down. I know it's a dysfunction to say this, but I want to apologize for persons of my color who don't seem to have the ability to see their racism or support of it. This is from our reading. Jonathan Kozel wrote, and I quote, that white people will probably go on leading our normal lives and will go on participating in our nation in a normal way unless there comes a time where Black people can compel us by methods of extraordinary pressure to interrupt our pleasure. And I say, wake up, wake up, wake up from your comfort. And that's for anybody on YouTube that happens to see us.
Thank you, Cheryl. Cindy, don't forget to unmute before you talk.
I think my earlier comment felt very negative compared to when I was a kid in North Carolina, which turns out to be one of the most racist.
Oh, Rose.
You
a lot of years, but and certainly a lot of change. I mean, concretely a lot of change, but we still aren't there by a long shot. And I think many people look and say, oh, well, kids will go to school together, they go to the movies together, all these things are taken care of. And that's not true. The biggest differential, I think, is the economic, the lack of wealth that has been not in the Black community building up for years, certainly a few, but not many compared to white families. And that so much is built on top of that. The ability to buy a house, to live in a safe neighborhood, it just goes on and on and on based on achievements, which do have to do with skin color. So how to change it? Hopefully local organizations, neighborhood groups are mixed and will remain or become more mixed. Whether they can solve economic problems is up in the air. I guess we'll see. If we
Thank
live
you.
long enough.
Thank you, Cindy. Richard?
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, there's no way I can get what I want to say into 1 minute, but just to respond to Amal, who I'm glad to see you there, Amal. And Amal's one of the folks that have been coming to racism meetings for many, many years. And I hope soon we can get together person to person, because I think a lot of what maybe misperceptions, when we have person to person meetings, I think we can, especially after the meetings, we can talk this stuff through at a face-to-face level. But I just want to say, Amal, that no, I am listening to you, and I am genuinely trying to understand where you're coming from, and I think part of this, look at, if hopefully you can see my shirt. My shirt is white. My skin is not. I've said this many times that I'm at the point now that anybody who refers to white, quote, or black, quote, or persons of color, quote, they automatically have a strike against them in terms of credibility when it comes to discussion. Not that they're totally no credibility at all, but we've got to get beyond the skin issue. Yes, it's endemic to our history and to oppression. Yes, it is. But this is 2021, and we've got plenty of representation of all skin colors, whether it's the head of police of the Minneapolis Police Department, or it's mayors, or it's presidents, or it's governors or senators, House of Reps. But ultimately, getting back to Nancy's.
Sorry, Richard, that was your time was up a little bit ago. You only get a minute. Sorry.
Thank you.
Next time.
Okay.
Michelle.
Thank you, Phyllis, for bringing this article up and to our attention, because I enjoyed it. And thank you, Marva, for sharing your personal stories. And all the personal stories that I've heard here have really brought home a lot of insight for me, because I think personal storytelling really does personalize, for lack of a better word, experience, so that we can understand better. Because when we learn of each other's struggles and in each other's upbringings and things, I think that just makes it much more real for each of us. I think storytelling, as lots of people say, is a very powerful tool in helping us learn and grow. And the persona of the League of Women Voters volunteer that I am, I've got to say, anybody who currently is having an election right now, please, please, please go out and vote. It's so important, especially in these small elections that may be going on in your communities right now. They have such great impact. And, we're going through this struggles of having voter suppression issues being thrown left and right in all the jurisdictions around this country right now. And if we can just step out and get out the vote, to show people that we really do, we're citizens and we want to vote and we don't want to be oppressed here, especially people of color. So while we're able to and get out there to vote, we really need to express our voices in that regard. So I just want to remind everybody of that. So especially my colleagues here in Austin or in Austin.
Thank you,
Thanks
Michelle.
so much.
Thank you. Leonetta? If you're talking, you're still, there you go.
I love the article, and thank you so much for picking that. And I'm glad I got a chance to express myself on the subject.
Is that it? Thank you. Bill?
4 quick things. First of all, Marva, I was really sad to hear that you got COVID, but I'm pleased that you got through it. And I hope your symptoms, any remaining symptoms, pass quickly. Secondly, Amal, as always, really articulated what I was thinking. And I say a big amen to him on whataboutisms and all the things he said. So thank you, Amal. Thirdly, Cindy and I have been going to a Black Lives Matter demonstration that's on Oak and Carrollton in our neighborhood that started at George Floyd's death and was heavily participated until the election. And now we're going back.
Grace breakfast. That's the bottom line.
What?
Okay.
Sorry, Michelle is not unmuted.
Oh, okay.
Daddy's
And
coming
so-
back.
Go ahead.
He's muted now. Continue.
Okay. And mostly we get very positive response, but one of the things that struck me, a guy came and he said to us, "You realize you're white?" And he'd go away before I had a chance to respond. But yeah, we do. We realize we're white because whites should do this too. And finally, I'm going to listen to the poem. I read it and I'm going to go back and click on the link so I can hear it being said. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Nancy?
Okay. I want to piggyback on Michelle about the gun violence. You're right. If you would have gun control in this country, you wouldn't have so many guns in the community to commit the violent acts that happen. And white people have control over that. 2, Amal is right. Okay. You think everything is okay because you're not living this day to day like we are. Okay. So you have the privilege to think that everything is okay and is not. Okay. And 2, 3, why is there so much violent crime or why is there drugs and everything in inner city communities? Because drug dealers pay more than minimum wage. It is that's it. Okay. You cannot live on $7.25 an hour and think that people are not going to resort to other means to survive. Okay. 3, if you think white people don't kill each other, go watch ID. The majority of the TV shows and the things that are broadcast on Investigation Discovery are white people killing white people and doing horrific things to each other. So don't think it's just black people killing black people. And lastly, I want to say the issue with police brutality is why is it that so many black people end up dead at the hands of the police, but white people like Dylan Roof and Kyle Rittenhouse and others, so many others manage to get arrested and don't die. That's the other half that is not being said when we're talking about police brutality and how it affects African Americans. The disparity and the hypocrisy of it. That's the other issue. Okay. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Nancy. So now I get to say some things because the role of the facilitator is you have to keep your mouth shut during the conversation. First, I want to go back to what Marion I think Marion was talking about the Billie Holiday movie, which I've watched, but also if you haven't seen it yet, Judas and the Black Messiah. J. Edgar Hoover also has a role in that film. And my basic stance is if J. Edgar Hoover persecuted or was after somebody, I think that person is probably A, innocent, or B, a freedom fighter. And so there's nothing wrong with being a freedom fighter. So any enemy of J. Edgar Hoover is somebody I feel like I'll look into supporting. So there's so many things about this that came up, like, you know, it wasn't stated here, but it is often asked when, especially only really a Black teenager commits a crime, where are the parents? Where are the parents? Possibly working 3 jobs to pay rent and have food and pay utilities and have a vehicle. Because why? Systemic oppression exists. So before you're gonna go after somebody or a community for what happens, you have to look what's making that community have the conditions it has. I don't know very often if a white teenager commits a crime that I've heard anybody say, where were the parents? there was a statement in the by Alexander. He said the jury, they knew that the country would burn if they got this wrong. Now, Tucker Carlson said something really similar, but Alexander seems to be saying they knew what was right and what was wrong in this verdict, and they chose to do the right thing. Tucker Carlson says basically the jury came to its conclusion because it was afraid of what would happen. It was afraid that cities would burn. Tucker Carlson had a cop on that he cut off, and before he cut him off, he brought up the topic of like, what if people were breaking Macy's windows? That is where Tucker Carlson lives. Property damage is way worse to him than people being killed, people being executed on the streets. We have to understand that there is systemic oppression that contributes to community difficulties. Communities are abandoned, even in the city of New Orleans. Communities are completely abandoned by the city, by society, by the other citizens. And there isn't necessarily justifications for things, but there's background reasons for things. I want to read something that I actually sent this to a friend of mine because she had a Facebook friend that she went to high school with who was a white male who he did exactly what this post says. So I'm just going to read it. It says, "Hi, I'm a white dude who likes to play devil's advocate because the other people's struggles are theoretical to me. It's fun to debate their right to equality. While we're here, I would like to center my voice and perspectives about a cause that means nothing to me. I'm here to take up all the oxygen in the room and exhaust people who are trying to fight against injustice so that we can maintain the status quo, which serves me. I have no interest in learning your frustration. I have no interest in learning. Your frustration is my ultimate goal. Let's engage." So I think as all white people need to keep this kind of comment in mind when we engage in conversations about topics that don't affect us. We have to listen more than talk. And I really hope people in the reading and hearing of the poems involved in this post felt some sort of healing from the trauma. I wasn't able to watch every minute of the trial because I'm at work, but the bits that I saw of people crying, the witnesses who were there crying on the stand and talking about how it still affects them. To me, that was like America got to see the trauma of what it's like to be Black in America. And although also one of the people was the white EMT lady, she was crying on the stand. Cheryl, that was just a meme. It wasn't a quote from anybody. So it's important to really understand, like, watch those witnesses, watch their testimonies again, and see, how much trauma is involved that people do cover up and just go about their daily lives, and people of color specifically, and manage to make a life for themselves until, or if it's cut short by a police execution on the street. So thank you all. I'm gonna just make an announcement and see if there's any others. We are meeting next week, 10 o'clock on Zoom, and Nancy will be the facilitator. We will have board meeting at 9. So Bill, if you could send me the link for 9 a.m., that'd be great. Any other announcements? Nope. Wow. Okay. Thank you all, and hopefully we'll see you all next week.
Have a good week.
What? Oh, I want to know